Okay, welcome back to the Metal Command podcast. Tony back here with you. Let's discuss an album that I absolutely love and that I've been very big on. And of course, this band just came on the program, A through Z. And they have a new album out called A through Z2. So for those of you that are not familiar with this band, I'll put a couple tracks in the show notes so you can check them out. But it features great musicians. Simone Maloney, who produced the album and mixed it. He's a phenomenal guitar player. Ray Alder, many of you know from Fates Warning. Mark Zonder, many of you know from Warlord and Fates Warning. Nick Van Dyke, as you may know from Redemption. Jimmy Waldo plays on this. Jimmy Waldo, of course, from Alcatraz. Just a great group of musicians playing on this album. Now, folks, if you go back throughout the history of the show, I have talked about A through Z. I talked about their first album, which I said was a perfect album. Perfect production, perfect songwriting. I mean, you just couldn't get any better than the first A through Z album. It doesn't get any better than their first album until the second album comes out, and it actually is better. So this is a great group. I think that when Mark formed this band, I don't know if he probably realized how magical a lot of this music would become, but this second A through Z album, I think, is better than the first. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. It is a little heavier. If you haven't checked out, if you've heard the first album but haven't heard much off the second, it's a little bit heavier. It is definitely, like I have said in a previous episode, it's like Journey on steroids. All the songs are well crafted. They are well written. The production is phenomenal. Everything about the album is amazing, including the merchandising, including some of the cool stuff like Mark Zonder selling bass drum heads and drum heads with the band autographing them with the album cover on the drum head. I mean, everything about this is phenomenal. The one thing that jumped out on me on this record, before anything, aside from the songwriting, is the vibe of this album is so much different than the previous album. And the vibe is much better. It has a different feel to it. And to further elaborate on that, I had Nick Van Dyke and Mark Zonder on my show, and we talked about this. Check out this interview clip where we talk about what changed between the first album and the second. Check this out.
I think part of what you're hearing is you're talking about guys that, not all of them, but 90% of them know each other, have known each other. There's the utmost respect going on. And just a certain, I think, and it's not going to be in any liner notes and it's not going to be in the speakers, but there's a certain cohesiveness and everybody buying in, kind of like a sports team where everybody buys into the same thing and everybody's pushing in the same direction. That wasn't on the first record. And I think that's part of what you're hearing as well. I think part of what you're hearing, too, is just the songwriting and Nick's different ideas on the guitar that took it in a little bit of a more aggressive direction too. It's not like it was the same guitar and all of a sudden Jimmy plays and whoa, there we go, we're heavy. It has a lot to do with Nick too.
I will tell you, this is also the first record I've ever done where I went back and re-recorded my guitars after the drums were done, because there's stuff that Mark had mentioned earlier that Ray will sort of perform to the drums, and Simone did the same thing. Some of the riffs are directly reflective of what Mark did on the drums and tightening them up, and frankly, it was kind of exciting. It's hard to get really thrilled about redoing stuff you've already done, but you could tell the payoff was there, and it was like very energizing to do that. So everybody's sort of rowing together and doing their best to make the song as best as they could.
So we talked about the vibe of the album, and there are some differences. I'll tell you one of the most unsung differences from this album from the last one. And it's somebody that, of course, plays an instrument that rarely gets recognized, and that would be Jimmy Waldo, his keyboard sound, which has kind of a more aggressive tone to it. Folks, that added so much to the music. It really did. And Mark Zonder talks about that. Check out this clip from the interview that we just did. And Jimmy Waldo obviously playing the keys Jimmy Waldo from Alcatraz playing that. I thought that added a lot of a pretty cool element to the album, to be honest.
Well, I think the keyboards on the first album were very proggy. Genesis, Yes. I mean, Viv was a huge Yes fan. Kind
Yeah.
of thin, light. It worked. It was fine, but it didn't add any power and it didn't add any quote aggressiveness. I actually think Jimmy is and the keyboards are kind of the unsung hero of this album that won't get the attention like a lead guitar player or a lead singer will get.
Right.
And you hit it right on the head. There's one thing to have a guitar sound that's distorted and that's cool, but when you mix it up the way Deep Purple and Rainbow did when the guitar and the key are together, there's just a certain sound that a lot of people don't have anymore. And those kind of parts, really give this album a lot more edge without being like over the top distorted guitar and getting kind of stupid with it. It adds a great flavor to it that really helps the direction.
So that's Mark Zonder, Nick talking about Jimmy Waldo being in the band A through Z. So the artwork is cool. There's definitely, again, Hugh Syme did a phenomenal job on the artwork. But generally speaking, it's a more refined album. One of the things that they did is they approached this. They didn't care who wrote the song or who did what on the song. All they did was think of better ways to refine and make the song better. And I think the vibe that, these guys talked about, the difference between the first and the second album is that it was approached in a much different way. And when you listen to the first album, for example, it feels more like a project kind of thrown together. It didn't really feel as much like a band like this second album feels like. Like this feels like a band on this second album that feels like they've been playing together for decades. Like that is the feeling I ended up getting when I was listening to this record. And because of that, and because they had such great chemistry together, the songs just turned out great. I mean, I said the first album there wasn't a bad song, and I still stand by that. And there really isn't a bad song on this one. Not at all. Now I Walk Away, weirdly enough, is one of my favorite songs on it. A Wordless Prison has probably my favorite guitar solos on the album. Just an incredible track. Now, they've put videos out for The Remedy, I Am Numb, and Nothing Is Over. The Remedy is probably my favorite of the three videos that they've done, for this record. But I got to be honest, I got to give Mark Zonder a lot of credit for putting this together. I give him credit for just pulling out all the stops. I mean, he went top notch on everything, from the artwork to the group of musicians he helped put together to the merchandising of the album. Now, I don't know how much input he had on like the vinyl records and the designs and what they look like, but folks, if you look at the vinyl variants of this album, they are absolutely incredible. And then doing cool merchandise like selling autographed drum heads that have the album cover on the drum heads with the band's autographs on it. It's top quality. It really is that good. And interestingly enough, as much as I have followed the bands that Zonder has been in, I never really had him on my show. I never really knew him that well until the first A to Z album came out. And it's one of those things when I look at it, like, man, I wish I would have interviewed this guy earlier in my radio life, but I guess better late than never. But generally speaking, folks, this album is a 10 out of 10. It is an album of the year candidate. And I got to give props, man. Mark Zonder being the guy to put a lot of this together. There were no shortcuts taken on this album at all. None. And I got to give them props for that. 10 out of 10. If you like progressive heavy metal, if you like AOR, it appeals to both people. Again, I think Ray Alder, one of the complaints was that Ray, he sounds like he's struggling a bit and that he's really not singing all these high notes. Well, folks, the songs, when you listen to them, they don't really require that. The one thing I've noticed about Ray's vocals over the years is he goes more for the melody than just singing high pitched and, high screams that he did on the No Exit album with Fate's Warning. And I think Ray's voice is a perfect fit for this music. So generally speaking, folks, 10 out of 10. If you have not checked this out, if you like prog metal, if you like AOR, if you like both, you're going to love this album. The reviews have been nothing but phenomenal on this. And everything from the logo to the merchandising to the artwork is top notch. So check that album out. I'm going to have songs in the show notes. I'll have a link to order the album for you. And let me know what you think about this record. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching. And if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.